Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Convention of States, Indiana Live. You know, are you a person who thinks that we still have a big problem with our federal government in Washington, D.C.? Well, if you are, stay tuned, because we at Convention of States have a solution as big as the problem. Well, good evening, everyone. Once again, my name's Dale Parrish. I'm the state director here for Convention of States in Indiana, and really looking forward to our broadcast this evening. We have a jam-packed broadcast tonight, and I'm very excited about this broadcast because we're going to be introducing some new people to you that are going to be that will become regulars on our broadcast. So I want to get started here pretty soon. So as you know, our broadcast is divided up into segments. And in our first segment here, we're going to have a young lady come in that's going to become somewhat of a regular with us going forward. Her name is Debbie Stewart. And Debbie is a homeschool teacher, and she teaches a constitutional literacy program. And I won't get into any more details because we'll let her talk all about that when she comes on. But very excited to have Debbie with us. She's a Convention of States volunteer, I might mention. So she's part of our family here in Indiana. Then our second segment is going to be a little different tonight. I'm going to introduce to you a new member to our Indiana Convention of States team. And this young man is going to, like I said, will make some appearances going forward on our broadcast. And his name is Maringo Mike. So think about that a little while. You'll learn a little bit more about him when we get to that part. Then after that, we'll get into some, I'll bring up my PowerPoint. We'll get into some numbers about Convention of States here in Indiana. Then we'll get into the basics of Convention of States, the three tenets that our program is based upon. And then we'll do some wrap up. We'll try to recognize individuals that we have listening to us tonight, perhaps put some comments up if we see any, but then we'll do a wrap up. So we got a lot to cover this evening. Now, first of all, before I get started, I want to give my standard warning to you, and that is that in the event your screen would freeze up or go blank, you please know that we've encountered a technical problem. And if that does occur, don't stick around and wait for us to come back on. It just takes too long to bring everything up again, and I don't want you to have to wait that long. If that happens, just please go ahead and sign off and put us back on your calendar for next Monday evening at 7 p.m. and we'll come on then and give it another try. All right. So I always try to give that warning to everyone because it has happened. And then, you know, with technology these days, technology is wonderful as long as it works. But sometimes it doesn't work. So that's it for the warning. Now let's bring on our guest this evening. And we'll bring Debbie in to the broadcast. And hi, Debbie.
Hi, Dan.
Thank you for coming on tonight. And welcome to the broadcast. I'm going to go ahead and put up your name there so people can see who you are. But like I said, Debbie is a Convention of States volunteer. And first met Debbie a couple years ago when she came on the scene as a volunteer, and I tried to talk her into becoming a district captain. But she was pretty busy at that time, and I guess has continued to be pretty busy. So, well, Debbie, let's get started here. And why don't you tell us a bit about yourself? You're a homeschool teacher. Tell us about that to get things started here.
Okay, well, I started homeschooling my children when they were, around the kindergarten age, and homeschooled them through the years. But in the midst of doing that, we bumped into things called homeschool co-ops, where you meet just kind of like a school does, and they hire you as teachers. And through the years, I've got to teach a lot of classes, but mainly high school classes of health and government and economics, and I've done a worldview class. But the last couple of years, I've gotten to teach a Constitution class. And so we meet once a week, and we're in the classroom for an hour. And during that hour, that's not a lot of time, so I'm very particular about what we cover. And then I task them out for a whole week's worth of homework. And then when we meet back, we go through the homework. We talk about new stuff. Today or next week they'll take a test. So it's just like a regular classroom, but I only get them for 1 hour per week.
How large is your class, Debbie?
My class is only 1 hour long.
No, I mean, how many students do you have in your class?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So on my Monday class, I get to teach it twice. My Monday class has 11, and my Tuesday class has 15.
Okay. So it's relatively small classes, and that's good. And it's 1 hour long, huh?
1 hour long, it is.
Okay. And I think you told me your meeting, your classes are being held at a church, local church. Is that what it is?
That's correct. We rent out the entire building of the church except for the offices, and we have the auditorium. We have the gym, we have the cafeteria, all the classrooms, and it's basically about 200 families that meet from preschool to through high school.
Sounds like a large church. Well,
we're kind of busting at the seams right now.
Okay. All right. Well, okay, Deb, give us. I keep calling you Deb. Do you prefer Deb or Debbie? Does it make any difference?
Doesn't make one bit of difference.
Okay. Well, why don't you kind of get into some background of what you're going to be doing here? Kind of give us, folks, tonight is going to be strictly an introduction of Debbie and what she's going to be doing over the coming broadcast. So we're just kind of starting from scratch here and building. So you want to give us some more background then, Debbie?
Sure. So most of us know that in 1776, the Declaration of Independence was signed, and that was mainly to let the King of England know that we were breaking away because he had been doing a lot of really bad stuff to us. And so the Declaration is very specific about all the things that the King was doing wrong and how they tried to make that right, but he didn't want to go along with that. And then shortly after there in 1777, the 13 colonies needed some kind of a document to begin to come together. So they drafted the Articles of Confederation, which is considered our America's first constitution. And they operated under the Articles for almost 10 years. But what happened was they realized that the Articles of Confederation were very weak. And specifically, there were three things. One was that it didn't give government the power to tax. There was no judicial or executive branch, only a legislative branch. And then the third thing was the way the articles were set up is that anything that had to get passed, all 13 states had to ratify, which is very difficult to get 100% of agreement on everything. And so they called a convention, a constitutional convention in 1787, and it went from May of 1787 until September, so 4 months in the hot summer in Philadelphia in Independence Hall.
Right.
Done secretly, even though they didn't have the windows open and the curtains were shut because they didn't want people knowing what they were doing.
Really?
And the real reason they were doing this, they wanted to revise the Articles of Confederation. But what they found out is when they began to meet that the articles weren't going to do it, and they really needed to just just draft up a whole new constitution. And
so this brings up the topic of runaway convention. You've heard that before, right? And the claim that the first constitutional convention was a runaway, but
right.
really, in fact, it wasn't, right? I mean, go ahead.
Well, no, it wasn't at all, because they decided it wasn't the Congress that did that. It was the states that decided to do that. Now, Congress came on board later and said, yes, we believe in what you're doing. And then after 7 states brought it up, 5 more jumped on. And interesting in there, too, is that they actually, before they came up with that constitution, they actually amended the process that the Articles of Confederation said they had to follow. So they, instead of having to be 13 states that had to ratify, they amended the process and got it approved ahead of time that said 9 states, only 3/4 needed to ratify.
Okay, all right. So they labored and drew up a constitution, right?
They did, and there were 55 delegates that met all through the summer from 12 states. Rhode Island didn't want to have anything to do with it because they did not want a strong central government, so they didn't attend. And those 55 men were never there at the same time, but through the 4 months they came and went, and some got upset and left and didn't come back. But on September 17th of 1787, which actually is tomorrow, Constitution Day, right?
That's right.
They signed it. 39 of the 55 delegates signed the Constitution, and then they each went back to their states to try to get their states to ratify the new Constitution. And in the next year, 1788, New Hampshire became the 9th state to ratify. And then in the following year, 1789, both the Bill of Rights was added, because several of the states said, we will not sign on to this and ratify this until we know that there's a Bill of Rights.
Okay.
12 were proposed and 10 were accepted. And then also in 1789, George Washington was elected the very first president. He was inaugurated. And then in 1790, all 13 states ratified.
Okay, great. Okay, now tell us then about the series that you're going to, I call it the series. Tell us about the series that you're going to present that pertains to the Constitution that you're going to present to us.
Absolutely. This series is called Constitutional Literacy. It's written by Michael Ferris, and Michael Ferris has written a lot. One of his books is called Constitutional Law, but what he realized was most people are not at a college level of constitutional law. So his original idea was, when his kids got into high school, was how can I teach them this? So he took a lot of the things from his constitutional law, he put them into this workbook with a DVD series so that high schoolers and just your normal citizen could understand what are our rights in the Constitution, not what we think they are now, or even how the Supreme Court is interpreting them, but what were they originally intended to be by the Founding Fathers, and to become an enlightened citizen. So once you know what your rights are in the Constitution, once you know the restrictions on the government, then you can hold them accountable to that.
Okay.
So what's happening now is many people don't know what's in the Constitution. They don't know what it says. And so when the judicial branch or the executive branch is taking way too much authority and power, most people don't even know that they are stealing some of our rights, and they're doing things outside their boundary of their authority.
Exactly. We might mention here that Michael Ferris was one of the co-founders of Convention of States. Michael Ferris and Mark Meckler founded Convention of States, and if I understand it correctly, Convention of States was actually the idea of Michael Ferris.
Yes.
From the beginning. So anyway, well, tell us now. I understand there's a number of chapters that you're going to be that the series involves. Am I right? You want to touch on those a bit?
Absolutely, absolutely. There are 25 chapters, and we start the year with an introduction, which is what we'll be doing next month with you, that really lays out what was the purpose Michael Ferris wrote this book, what is an enlightened citizen, what do we need to be able to do, what's happening in this book. It's a great introduction to the fact that we have a runaway government, actually, and
Exactly.
they're doing way too many things, and they're really restricting our freedoms, and we don't even know they're getting stolen from underneath our feet. And then we move into Article 1, Section 1. We talk about judicial review and original intent. We talk about the powers of Congress. We'll also do a chapter on the Commerce Clause and the General Welfare Clause. They're way overreaching their boundaries. We'll talk about the powers of the president. Does the Bill of Rights apply to the states? And then we spend 3 or 4 chapters on free exercise of religion, freedom of speech. We go into freedom of association. Then we get into the right to keep and bear arms. All my students love that one, and that's real big news right now. We'll get the 4th Amendment. We'll talk due process. And then a little bit later on, we'll talk about things like abortion rights, homosexual rights, parental rights, international law, and the national debt. Oh. Everybody loves that one. I always like to bring the national debt clock up to my classroom and show them just how fast it's ticking, and yeah. That
clock that should impress, I would think, those young kids a great deal. That's a scary thing to watch tick away.
It is.
Well, great. Well, this sounds good. Let's reiterate one more time that your first installment, or the first chapter, will be presented on October 21st. Debbie says she's got a lot on her plate right now, so we can't get her back. So, October 21st, and that'll be the introduction, the series introduction. And so we're going to try to at least have her on once a month, and if at all possible, I think maybe we should try and get you in on twice a month, but we'll see how the schedule works out.
Right.
Hopefully things will lighten up a bit for you, so that maybe we could get you on twice a month. But anyway, this ought to be very good. I will say many of us in Convention of States, I know, have gone through this series, DVD aspect that Debbie mentioned earlier, that the series is offered in. Many of us have gone through that, but it was very good for me personally, and I'm looking forward to doing this again, because it's always good to review this material and refresh your memory. So.
Well, and a little warning too is if you do start studying this and listening to this or reading this, you will get angry, and that anger will move you to action, because when you realize what's really going on and you didn't know what was going on, and some of the things we've already lost for our freedoms, I tell you, some of my students walk out of class, they're mad.
Really?
Oh, yeah. It developed a passion in me. That's why I keep teaching this class, because I think it's wonderful.
And I know, Debbie, I know you told me you're gonna touch on Article 5, right? And our Colonel George Mason, the gentleman that brought in Article 5.
Yes.
So,
and actually, the last 2 chapters of this book are all on that. Okay. Convention of States, and was the Constitution illegally adopted, and all the myths that have went with that. And then, we just tell what the truths are.
Okay. All right. Excellent. And let me see if we've got any before I let you go here. Okay, got a couple comments there. Okay, good, positive comments. They're going to share what you're going to be talking about. So, okay. All right, Debbie. Well, I think that's it for this evening. And once again, I want to thank you for agreeing to do this. and look forward to you coming back and joining us on October 21st. Thank you very much, Deb.
Thank you, Dale. Really appreciate it.
Good night.
Okay, bye-bye.
All right. Okay, folks. Well, I want to move on to our next segment here, and I want to bring up a picture for you to take a look at here. I'm gonna. Well, I'll just leave it on a split screen there. This is this is our newest member of Convention of States here in Indiana, and his name is Marengo Mike. We actually when he, obviously this is a cartoon character, so when he came to us, he didn't have a name. So we ran a contest here in amongst the leadership in Indiana, and took in name suggestions. Then had a final vote on all the suggestions, and the name Marengo Mike was the name that won the voting. Now, you may be if you're from Indiana. I'm not from Indiana, so I did not know anything about this name. But if you're from Indiana, you might know about this. And I'm going to now show you a clip, a video, about a 1.5-minute video. And now I got to put this in context. This is, every month we have a what we call a state call. It's a conference call with the leadership individuals in the Convention of States here in Indiana, and I conduct the call. So every month we have a conference call. Well, the contest for naming our friend here took place in July, and we announced the name. So in August, we had him come back and speak to everyone a little bit, give a little more background as to his name, and thank everyone for being brought into the Convention of States family. So I think you're going to find this interesting. I hope I can pull this off. So I'm going to bring this video up, and like I said, it only runs about 1.5 minutes. So I hope you will enjoy this, and like I said, this will give you a little more information about this young man.
Hello and welcome, all you COS leaders. I'm so happy to be here to open the August state meeting. I know there's a lot to
Oh boy.
to cover tonight, including news on the exciting summit that just concluded. But before we get started, I wanted to tell
Okay, I hope you all can hear me. I'm going to start this again.
Hello and welcome, all you COS leaders. I'm so happy to be here to open the August state meeting. I know there's a lot to cover tonight, including news on the exciting summit that just...
Well, folks, I'm having technical problems. I'm sorry. So we will, like I said, I'm having some technical problems, so I'm not going to be able to show you the video clip that I wanted to show. So we will move on, and let me go ahead and bring up the PowerPoint, and we'll get going on that this evening, so that we can keep things moving along here. Now, I want to, as we normally do, I'll implement the slideshow option here, and so that we'll have a full screen, and that should be available to you there. All right. Okay, so let's get going here. Let's talk about some things that are available to us here in Convention of States here in Indiana. And the main thing available, of course, is our main website, conventionofstates.com. This is a national website that we utilize a great deal, has a wealth of information on it, and we also utilize it for the administration of our organization here in Indiana. Now, embedded in that national website is our state web page, conventionofstates.com/Indiana. We're also on social media, various platforms, Facebook, Convention of States, Indiana. This broadcast is being brought to you through that Facebook page this evening. So check out our Facebook page, Convention of States, Indiana. We're on YouTube. We have our own YouTube channel, COS Indiana. We're on Twitter, hashtag COS Indiana, Instagram, LinkedIn. So we're very, very much on the various social media platforms out there. Now, give you a few numbers here. Convention of States of Indiana in 2018, we surpassed 30,000 supporters here in the state. Been growing tremendously here in the state of Indiana, and we've set in 2019, we set our goal at 40,000 supporters. About 2,900 volunteers, and we have about 40 individuals in leadership positions. Now, if you have any inclination or any desire to get more involved in Convention of States here in Indiana, I encourage you, here's this website again, go to conventionofstates.com, click on the menu selection, take action, scroll down and look at the various positions that we have available here, and open it up, read about them. And if you're so inclined, if you want to get more information, go ahead and make application. Your name will come up on a report that I see and others, and one of us will then be in contact with you to further discuss your application. So strongly encourage you to do that if you want to get more involved. Okay, let's go into now the basics of Convention of States. And those basics are the problem, the solution, and our plan. So let's talk about the problem. The problem basically is we believe our government lacks the will and the courage to address certain basic structural issues in our country. And we're not blaming any one particular party. Both parties have contributed to this problem. It's been going on for decades. This is not a recent thing. So like I said, our elected officials lack the will and the courage to address this problem. Now, we've broken the problem down into what we call abuses. There are three major abuses that we see at this time. The first abuse is, of course, our national debt. And as Debbie mentioned in her segment earlier, she's going to be addressing this later on in the the Constitution Literacy series. But the national debt is not being addressed. And we all know that it's closing in on 23 trillion, unfunded liabilities over $250 trillion. So very, very little is being done to address our national debt. The second major abuse has to do with the regulatory crisis. And this comes out of our administrative state, which is now considered the fourth branch of government. And I know the current administration has been eliminating a number of regulations, but much, much more needs to be done. Plus, not only that, but also to rein in the process involved in the creation of these regulations. So the regulatory crisis. The last abuse that we've identified has to do with state sovereignty. You know, when our country was founded, there was a concept called dual federalism involved, where the federal government and the states would share in power. Well, that is all tilted in favor of the federal government. And yes, powers included, powers involved, money. We also think the career politician plays a role in this. In this abuse. So we think it's time for term limits. All right, let's move on then to what we see as the solution. Well, we see that the solution to this is right in Article 5 of our Constitution, and I know Debbie is going to be addressing this. Article 5 describes two methods of proposing amendments to the Constitution. And let's just touch on them real quickly. The first method is what we're used to seeing, where 2/3 of Congress will propose amendments that then have to be ratified by 3/4 of the state legislatures, or 38 states. Well, there is a second method, and that second method is where 2/3 of the state legislatures apply to hold a convention of states for the purpose of proposing amendments. And this is what we want to see happen. 2/3 of the state legislatures, 34 of them, have to make application for this to occur. And we want then at the convention amendments proposed that will address the abuses that we spoke about in the problem segment, or the problem part. So this is what we're all about, and bringing about this convention of states. Like I said, takes 34 states to bring it about. Any amendments that come out, any proposed amendments that come out of the convention, have to go through the same ratification process as in method 1, requiring 38 states, or 3/4 of the state legislatures, to ratify any amendments or amendment. Okay, what's our plan? Well, our plan is in two parts. The first part has to do with the application itself. We have Convention of States has actually drawn up the application that we want the states to use. And in that application, in the subject matter of the application, which determines the agenda of the convention, we address fiscal restraints, limiting power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and term limits. Those three areas, again, addressing the abuses that we identified in the problem segment. So that's the application strategy then, is to get all the states to use this very same application. And it's important because they all do have to be the same. The second part of our plan is mobilizing the grassroots. And when we talk about the grassroots, we're talking about you, me, and our legislators, state legislators. All part of the grassroots, growing and mobilizing the grassroots to bring this about. So please, if you're interested at all, and we encourage you to get involved. And we're now in all 50 states. Like I said, we've got over 30,000 supporters here in Indiana. We just eclipsed 4 million supporters nationwide. We do have 15 states that have made applications. So 15 states have passed this application. Indiana is one of those 15 states. We were the 6th state to make applications. So we got good momentum going, and we would love to have you join us. So please give that consideration. Thank you. Okay, let's get back here then, and let's let me see who has joined us tonight. There's Richard Loken. Richard is one of our region captains, so thank you for joining, Richard. Jerry Rowe, he's one of our information analysts here in the state. Don't know who that is. Okay, all right, okay. All right, well, I want to thank all of you for joining us this evening. And I do want to mention to you that our next broadcast will be on next Monday. Will be on September 23rd. And we're going to bring in one of our regulars, which Paul Phillips. We're going to bring him in. And where am I? I'm not, there I am. Okay. I couldn't see me. All right. So we're going to bring in Paul Phillips, our legislative liaison. Paul's somewhat of a regular on our program. And we're going to discuss the Indiana Faithful Delegate Law. And now this has to do with, as I said, Indiana is a passed state. We have passed the application, or the resolution, it's also called. But we've also passed legislation that deals with the delegates or the commissioners that we will be sending to the convention. So we're going to discuss that because there's some things about that we may want to change. All right. So Paul's going to come in and talk to us about that. All right. Okay. I want to wrap things up as we normally do with one of my favorite quotes, and that's a quote from one of our founders, Mark Meckler, and his quote is that we have a fundamental question facing our country, and that fundamental question is not what should we do. The question is who will decide. And that's what I want to wrap up things on, and that is the question facing us is a two-word question, very simply, who decides? And we believe in Convention of States that we, the people, should have a bigger say-so in the decisions being made in Washington, D.C. So once again, folks, I know we've gone a few minutes over our normal time this evening, but hope you have enjoyed it. And I'll work on getting that Marengo mic clip up and ready for you the next time. But you might just be on the lookout for him. He's going to become part of our broadcast. And mark your calendars for October 21st. Debbie will be back with an installment with her first chapter in the Constitutional Literacy series. So that's it for tonight. That's a wrap. Thank you all for joining us. Have a good evening. Good night.